On this solo cast episode, I'm going to walk you through the framework we use to help our clients become more efficient and more accurate in their estimation process so that they can spend less time creating estimates and actually still get a more accurate outcome on the other end, and how they can install this process so that those things improve over time.
This is the Agency Profit Podcast, the podcast for agency owners that want to run a more profitable business that doesn't depend on them. Introducing your host, CEO and co-founder of Parakeeto, Marcel Petitpas.
If you can't accurately predict the cost of earning your revenue, in layman's terms, how much time and or money it's going to take to deliver whatever you promised to the client, it's really hard to protect your profits. It's really hard to hire at the right time. It's really hard to avoid working overtime and weekends. It's really hard to scale the business because what you're trying to build is very unpredictable. And so we want to increase that predictability. That's going to lay the foundation for us as a business to scale. And the things that I see agencies often struggling with here is, number one, they are spending way too much time building estimates, and it's very costly. If you think about, if you bill out at $150, $200 an hour and it takes you a half a day to build one of these estimates, you're spending potentially thousands of dollars a week on generating estimates, and your client's waiting a long time for you to get those. The other challenge, of course, around this is that there is this correlation between effort and accuracy. And so you're often in this paradox where it's like, do we spend a lot of time on this to try and make it accurate, or do we do it quickly and just kind of hope that we don't end up getting burned? And they're not data driven a lot of the time. So often I hear agency owners talk about how, we want to use more data from our past projects, but it's kind of hard to do and it takes a lot of time. And so I'm going to show you how to improve that in this video. And finally, the processes and the outcomes that they're trying to predict are just not that predictable in and of themselves. And so that can become a challenge where, we're trying to hit a moving target essentially in our estimation process. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can, number one, start to make your estimation process much quicker without compromising on accuracy. Number two, how to improve the accuracy of that estimation process over time. And number three, how to install a process that is going to continually feed back into itself so that it's kind of self-tuning, like a machine learning algorithm, but you're going to develop your own machine learning algorithm for your business and for your estimates. So with that, let's dive right into the framework. The first and most important thing to identify is what I call your scoping metrics. And the simple way to explain this is you want to think about it in terms of, what are the questions that you're asking clients when you're in the discovery process? And you might want to fill in the blank in this sentence to try and answer that question, right? For every X, the complexity or effort of this project is going to increase, right? So the more X there is, the more effort and time it's going to take to do this. So in your case, it might be the more budget the client has, the more web pages the client needs, the more ad spend the client has, the more blog posts per month they need us to write. It's going to be different based on the kinds of services that you offer, but there's this kind of conversation that you're having in your head when you're in the discovery process with a client, right? Where it's like, you're trying to figure out what do they need so that you can try and triangulate how much time and effort it's going to require for us to do this thing. And those are things that I call your scoping metrics. They are the inputs of the scoping process, the questions that you're asking, the data points you're collecting from the client. And then what you're going to essentially do is start to build a relationship statement or a relationship line, right? So you probably also are starting to have this kind of conversation in your head where you're like, okay, well, for every $10,000 in budget that the client has, that adds this much time and effort to the website or to the project. Or for every, X dollars in ad spend that they have, that adds this much additional effort to the cost of managing that thing, right? So we want to start to develop this relationship line between our scoping metric and the time or effort or cost that it's going to take in order to deliver these outcomes to clients. And so the first kind of step here is to start to collect data on the relationship between those two things. And we do that by basically mapping how much time we thought it was going to take to how much time it actually took, right? So this is actuals versus estimates. This is tracking time. This is tracking costs. So whether you're using a timesheet based tracking system or a resource plan based, it doesn't matter. And your cost tracking, that could be happening in the similar tool or it could be happening in your accounting tool. But ultimately, we want to start to reconcile is, here's how much here's how many scoping metrics we had, right? How many web pages we were being asked to do or how much budget we had. And here's how long it took. And we want to track that over time. And what that's going to start to do is populate some data points on this graph, right? If you think about one axis as being time, the other as being scoping metric volume, then we're going to start to plot all these data points on this graph. And then it's going to be very easy to start to, over time, create a relationship line that's reliable so that we can get to a point where we can just have this very easy quantifiable statement of the client wants X and that's going to mean Y, because statistically we know that every X number of web pages we add to a project adds this many hours of design development and project management. And the more data points we get, the more reliable that trend line will become. So that's how we kind of think about creating a data-driven estimation process that's fast and accurate. So that's step one, is get your data. Step two is get your feedback from the team. So once you have this data on, hey, here's how long it's taking us, then we want to take that into conversations with the team, getting these feedback loops in place. And we've done an episode on this, so make sure you check that out. It's all about how to get your team bought into improving your process. But essentially the idea here is once you're collecting this data from the team, right? So you got your estimates to your actuals, then we want to go into meetings and ask them, hey, why did this go better than planned? Why did this go worse than planned? And start to surface ideas from them on how to improve the efficiency of the business, what kind of processes we can install, what kind of things we can change, so that we can just basically create repeatable excellence. And that's going to drive process improvements. And those process improvements are kind of the last key step of this thing, because what we're doing when we track actuals versus estimates is we're placing data points on this graph that is defining our relationship line. But process is what's going to actually start to create rails on that graph so that we start to push those data points towards the center and we start to push them closer to the relationship line. We make the process itself more predictable, which of course makes estimating a lot easier because we have more regularity. We have more of a normal distribution to those data points because we have a process that is starting to close the area of uncertainty around how much time, effort, or money it might take us to get a certain thing done, right? So those start to apply inward pressure on the distribution of those data points. And so over time, as we start to close the walls in and we start to collect more data, then our relationship line is just going to get more and more and more and more reliable until we have this very, very scientific statement that we can make of, for every X number of scoping metrics, it's going to take this much time to get it done, or this much cost, or this much effort. And over time, that's just going to get more and more and more accurate. And then all we really have to do is account for contingency on top of that. So if there's something about this client that is off, or that's new, or that's different, and we have some uncertainty, so let's pad this by 10%, 20%. And now we're able to whip up estimations extremely quickly. So final myth I want to bust around this is that a lot of people think that you have to spend a lot of time on estimates to make them accurate, and that's always going to be the case. And the truth is, if you set up your infrastructure properly and you get the correct data flow and you start to install the right processes, that does not have to be the case. You can actually start to spend less and less time on generating estimates and start to automate this process a lot more without ever compromising on accuracy. And that allows you to spend less time thinking about this, talking about this, get back to the client, get back to solving their problems and closing deals, get back to doing the work, and not have to worry as much about whether or not it's going to be profitable, because you're going to be architecting that into the way that you do this. So to summarize, the key steps to getting your accurate estimation process in place is: number one, identify your scoping metrics, right? Make sure that you're capturing those and quantifying those. Number two, make sure that you are collecting data so that you can understand the relationship between your scoping metrics and the effort required to deliver outcomes to your clients. Number three, make sure you get feedback from your team on where the gaps are and how to improve and close those gaps. And number four, make sure that you install processes to start to normalize the distribution of the data points on your relationship graph. So essentially making the processes that you're trying to estimate more predictable in layman's terms. And if you can do those four things well, you'll see your estimation process become more accurate and more efficient over time. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, that sounds awesome, but that also sounds like a lot of work and it sounds very complicated, well, we have built a tool that does this for you, actually. It's called Estimate by Parakeeto, and it is designed to help you make more data-driven, accurate estimations in record time using your historical time tracking data. So if you're interested in giving that a try, if it sounds fun to you, it's totally free to try. Just click the link in the description or the show notes, and you can go ahead and start a free trial. And we'd love to hear your feedback on what you think of the tool. If you enjoyed this video, if you got some value from it, share with a friend or leave us a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your questions. So wherever you're listening or watching this, leave us a comment down below. And with that, I hope this video finds you extremely well. I want to thank you for tuning into the show, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.